Picture the Philippine archipelago. It is a stunning constellation of over 7,000 islands, characterized by pristine beaches, dense, emerald green forests, and closely knit communities where generations of families share homes and histories under one roof. But when the sun dips below the horizon and the shadows of the jungle lengthen, this tropical paradise gives way to a profound, ancient darkness. This is the domain of the Aswang, a broad and terrifying umbrella term used in Filipino folklore to describe shape-shifting malevolent entities, ghouls, and witches. But among this dark pantheon, there is one creature that stands supreme in the hierarchy of terror. She is the apex predator of the midnight sky, a monster that has haunted the nightmares of the archipelago for centuries. She is the Manananggal. The very name of the creature is a warning. Derived from the Tagalog root word tanda-ek, which translates literally to remove or to separate, the word Manananggal means the one who separates itself. To understand the Manananggal is to understand a terror that does not lurk in the shadows as a foreign, unrecognizable beast, but one that hides in plain sight. By day, she is often described as an ordinary, sometimes seductively beautiful woman, a neighbor or a recluse who blends seamlessly into the fabric of the barrio. She walks among the townspeople, quiet and elusive, harboring a dark, devastating secret. The true horror of the Manananggal is not just her monstrous form, but the realization that the monster could be the woman living right next door. The transformation from a human woman into an airborne predator is a gruesome, ritually bound process that occurs strictly under the cover of darkness. As midnight approaches, the woman retreats to a secluded area, perhaps deep within a bamboo grove, a patch of banana trees, or an abandoned, unlit structure. There, in the suffocating silence of the night, she sheds her clothing and prepares for the physical schism. The catalyst for this horrific metamorphosis is a specially prepared noxious oil. She massages this foul-smelling unguent all over her flesh while staring at the moon and murmuring archaic, forbidden incantations. As the magic takes hold, her human biology violently betrays her. Her fingernails elongate, hardening into sharp, metallo-keratinized claws capable of tearing through flesh and prying open the windows of unsuspecting homes. Her teeth grow into jagged fangs. From the skin flaps of her back, massive, leathery, bat-like wings violently erupt. But the most terrifying aspect of the transformation is the separation. Right at the waist, her flesh, spine, and muscle tear apart. Her upper torso detaches completely from her lower half, exposing a mass of raw, trailing viscera, leaving her defenseless legs and lower body standing upright and rooted in the dirt. The winged upper half takes to the sky. As she flies, her large intestines undulate and rotate in the air, acting as a grotesque rudder to stabilize her flight mechanics as she surveys the jungle canopy for prey. The Manananggal is a highly specialized hunter with an incredibly acute sense of smell, capable of detecting the scent of a sick person, or, more commonly, the amniotic fluids of a pregnant woman from miles away. Her primary food source is the blood, the hearts, the livers, and the phlegm of the sick, but her absolute favorite meal is the blood and life force of an unborn human fetus. Once she has locked onto the scent of a sleeping victim, she glides silently through the night air and perches directly on the thatched straw or tin roof of the victim's home. It is here that she deploys her most terrifying weapon. The Manananggal possesses a long, hollow, proboscis-like tongue. This organ is thread-thin, highly flexible, and can be distended to an astonishing length of up to 25 feet. She slips this needle-like tongue through the tiny gaps or holes in the roof, slowly lowering it into the bedroom below. The pointed tip acts like a surgical syringe, effortlessly piercing the sleeping mother's navel and puncturing the womb to siphon out the fetus and the mother's blood. When the victims wake, the tragic aftermath is often an unexplained and sudden miscarriage, an event that historical communities frequently blamed on the nocturnal visits of this creature. But how does one know the Manananggals hunting the creature's approach is cloaked in a brilliant, terrifying acoustic illusion? Her presence is almost universally heralded by the sound of the Tik-Tik or wake-wak bird, which is either her supernatural familiar or the literal sound of her leathery wings slicing through the air. The acoustic phenomenon operates on a principle of inverse spatial awareness, designed to paralyze her prey with confusion. If the Tik-Tik sound is loud and distinct, you can breathe a sigh of relief, for the Manananggal is hunting far away. But if the sound grows faint, distant, or completely silent, terror should grip your heart, because the creature is in immediate proximity, likely perched directly above your roof. How does a woman become such a terrifying entity? The etiology of the Manananggal is vastly different from the standard Western vampire bite. The curse of the Aswang is a complex contagion, often passed down through generations like a dark hereditary disease, or actively acquired through a bizarre, visceral ritual involving a black chick. To consciously initiate the transformation and acquire these dark powers, a practitioner must seek out a fertilized chicken egg, specifically containing a black chick. The initiate holds this unhatched egg tight against her belly, or places it deep within her armpit, binding it with a cloth. While chanting specific incantations, the initiate waits. Through a dark, supernatural osmosis, the essence of the bird, or the physical chick itself, passes directly through the skin and into the woman's stomach. Once the parasitic chick takes root inside her, it replaces her humanity with an insatiable, overwhelming craving for human flesh and blood. Even more tragically, the curse is often an inescapable burden. A dying Manananggal is trapped in an agonizing purgatory. She cannot truly die and find release until she passes the monstrous burden onto a successor, typically a younger female family member. The transmission of this dark gift is an intimate and horrifying ritual. The dying elder places her mouth directly over the mouth of the younger initiate. The living, demonic black chick then hops up from the stomach of the dying woman, out of her mouth, and directly down the throat of the new host. Despite her terrifying aerial dominance and lethal feeding mechanisms, the Manananggal has a fatal vulnerability, her discarded lower half. The grounded torso, consisting of her legs and lower digestive tract, remains completely defenseless, hidden in the brush or an empty house. If a brave soul can track the creature's flight path and locate this hidden lower torso, they hold the power to permanently destroy the monster. The execution requires the use of common, everyday domestic items. One must take crushed garlic, coarse ash, rock salt, strong vinegar, or hot spices and smear them aggressively onto the exposed raw flesh of the severed waist. These ingredients act as a supernatural caustic acid. They burn the magical connective tissues, rendering the flesh entirely incompatible. When the upper torso returns from its hunt, heavily engorged with blood, it will frantically try to reattach to its anchor. Because of the salt and garlic, the two halves will desperately repel one another. Unable to recombine, the creature is trapped. As the sun rises, the purifying, absolute force of daylight will strike the separated Manananggal, and she will disintegrate into ashes or perish instantly. To protect a home from an airborne attack, Filipinos rely on ancient preventative measures. Leaving small pots of uncooked rice, ash, or salt around the perimeter of the house or near windows is said to deter the creature from ever landing on the roof. Furthermore, the Manananggal is absolutely terrified of the buntot pagi. This is a traditional whip fashioned from the dried, barbed tail of a stingray. The mere sound of the buntot pagi slashing through the night air is enough to send the creature fleeing, and a direct strike from the stingray tail, especially when coated in spices, is considered a highly effective lethal weapon against the monster. To view the Manananggal merely as a campfire story designed to frighten children into obedience is to misunderstand her completely. The creature is a profound, highly charged historical artifact. Her origins stretch back to the ancient Sanskrit word asura, which denoted shape, shifting, power, seeking demigods in Hindu and Buddhist cosmologies, through centuries of maritime trade. This concept traveled to the Philippines and localized into the intimate, terrestrial threat of the Aswang. But the Manananggal as we know her today was heavily manipulated and weaponized by Spanish colonial forces beginning in the 16th century. Prior to Spanish missionization, the indigenous societies of the Philippines were animists, holding deep reverence for the natural world. At the center of their spiritual and social life were the Babaylan, also known as Catalonans. These were powerful, highly respected priestesses, female shamans, and transgender women who served as community healers, agricultural leaders, and physicians. When the Spanish Catholic friars arrived, bringing with them a fiercely patriarchal worldview, they were deeply unsettled by the vast autonomy and influence these native women held to subjugate the population and enforce conversion to Catholicism. The friars engaged in a systematic campaign to disenfranchise the female leaders. They deliberately chew-upped pre-existing local animist beliefs and aggressively relabeled the respected Babaylan as brujas or witches. By associating the independent female healers with the cannibalistic fetus, eating horrors of the viscera sucker, the colonial power successfully generated a culture of fear. The powerful matriarchs were transformed in the public eye into terrifying monsters, effectively transferring spiritual authority from the indigenous women to the male Catholic priests. The Manananggal is, therefore, the tragic, monstrous embodiment of a stolen female legacy. The horror of the self-segmenting viscera sucker is not confined to the borders of the Philippines. The Manananggal belongs to a vast pan-Asian constellation of horrifying female entities that haunt the folklore of neighboring countries, pointing to a deeply shared Austronesian mythological root. If you travel to Malaysia or Singapore, you will encounter the terrifying Penanggalan, unlike the Manananggal, who separates at the waist and retains her arms and chest. The Penanggalan detaches exclusively at the neck. She is a floating, disembodied head that flies through the night, trailing her lungs, stomach, and bloody intestines behind her like grotesque tentacles. From a distance, she sparkles like a will-o'-the-wisp. Because her exposed organs swell with the blood of her victims, the Penanggalan must soak her trailing intestines in a hidden vat of strong vinegar to shrink them enough so they can fit back into the empty cavity of her human shell before sunrise. In Thailand, a similar creature is known as the Krasue, a cursed floating head and entrails that emits a faint, eerie luminescence as it drifts low over the rural rice fields. In the island of Bali in Indonesia, she is known as the Layak, a powerful witch practicing dark sorcery who can detach her head to hunt. In Cambodia, she is the Ap. Despite the regional differences in names and specific anatomical mechanics, the core terror remains universal across Southeast Asia, a female entity, unbound from her physical form, returning in the dead of night to consume the most vulnerable members of society. Despite the rapid modernization of the Philippines, the deep-seated belief in the Manananggal has not been relegated to the history books. She continues to cast a long, terrifying shadow over both the rural provinces. Like Capiz, often considered the epicenter of Aswang lore, and the sprawling, concrete urban jungles, the belief in the creature remains so potent that it can still trigger mass hysteria. In 1992, during the height of a busy election season, the densely populated urban district of Tondo in Manila was entirely consumed by rumors that a Manananggal was actively terrorizing the area. Local women who tragically suffered miscarriages during this time attributed their losses directly to the creature. The panic was so intense that pregnant women in the village absolutely refused to step outside their homes after dark, proving that the ancient fear of the viscera sucker easily penetrates the modern metropolis. Today, the Manananggal has evolved from a rural superstition into a titan of global pop culture and a powerful symbol of identity. She is the star of Philippine cinematic history, most notably terrifying audiences in the legendary 1984 horror anthology Shake, Rattle and Roll. She is a formidable antagonist in modern graphic novels and the globally acclaimed Netflix anime series Tres, where she navigates the criminal underworld of modern Manila She has even crossed oceans to appear in American television shows like Grimm and Supernatural, and has been adapted into the Marvel Comics universe as a tragic superhuman biologist. But perhaps her most important modern role is in literature, where modern Filipino writers and poets are actively reclaiming her. Instead of viewing the Manananggal as a symbol of demonic evil, these modern storytellers embrace her as an avatar of untethered female empowerment. She represents the woman who refuses to be contained by patriarchal boundaries, a fierce entity who severs herself from societal expectations to take flight on her own terms. The Manananggal endures because she is a mirror. She reflects our deepest anxieties about mortality, the vulnerability of the unborn, and the terrifying, uncontrollable forces of the natural world. She is a reminder of the violent collision between ancient animism and colonial religion. So the next time you find yourself under the tropical night sky, listen closely to the wind. If you hear the faint, distant sound of the Tik-Tik bird, do not ignore it. Check your windows, gather your salt and garlic, and pray for the dawn. Because in the Philippines, the monsters of the past are always ready to take flight once again.